Man, that little squirrel. Prairie Creek is an Army Corps of Engineers campground on the banks of Woodruff Lake on the Alabama River. When Stephanie and I got here during the week, it was peaceful and quiet. And after walking around the campground and setting up camp, we caught a beautiful sunset. The next morning, I enjoyed coffee on the courtesy dock located right next to our campsite and got to watch many birds, including a pair of wood ducks and flocks of cormorants. Home by Friday, so we don't have to stop and get gas. These are definitely cormorants. They've got little short tails. After breakfast, we headed to the Old Cahawba Archaeological Park, located just outside of Selma, Alabama. Our first stop was the charming visitor center, where we received a lot of information and bought a couple of souvenirs. Then we went across the street to Alabama's first Gothic Revival church, St. Luke's Episcopal. It was built in 1854 and sat near the center of town on the Alabama River. When the town was abandoned, St. Luke's was taken apart and moved to Martin Station, Alabama. It was brought back to the Archaeological Park and reconstructed in 2007, but not in its original location on the river due to flooding concerns. Wow, the woodwork is just incredible.
People were definitely smaller back then.
Yeah, these pews are.
I'm short, Susie, and look at how much.
It's crazy. These are the headstones of the Saltmarsh family. Years ago, some farmer probably plowed them up, but they were found in a nearby ravine, and they're being held here. One day, if they find out where the actual burial plot of the Saltmarsh family was located, they will return these tombstones to their rightful place. This house was built by Judge Fambro in the 1840s. And he and his wife didn't have any children, but they often hosted students from a nearby academy. When the town kind of dried up and they moved away, it later became occupied by D. Ezekiel Arthur. Mr. Arthur was born into slavery, and when he was emancipated, he traveled to several different states to find his mother and his sister who had been sold away. And when he found them, they moved here. E. Marie Arthur was the daughter-in-law of Mr. Ezekiel, and she lived in this house until 1995. And there is a copper bucket over here, and that is a remnant of when she lived here. This is the two-story slave quarters built behind the mansion of Stephen Barker. After the Civil War, the property was bought by the Kirkpatrick family, who farmed there. When the mansion burned down, the Kirkpatrick's grandson added a wing and some columns to the slave quarters and moved in. Later, the columns were removed. To me, there was an aura of sadness about the place. This literal wellhead is the last remnant of the Peagues' home. Built originally as a jail in 1827, the Peagues turned it into a lovely home, complete with cedar maze. Mr. Peagues died in the Civil War, and afterwards people reported seeing a ball of light moving through the cedars in the cedar maze. Sometimes it would come close enough for people to almost touch it. Then it would dart back into the cedars. That ball of light became known as the Peagues' ghost, and people still report seeing it. So this schoolhouse was built in the 1930s, and it served the African American community here. And back then, the schools were segregated, but if a community built a school, they could petition the state for a teacher. So the teacher taught all subjects and all students, no matter what grade they were in. So everybody was taught in this little tiny little room. This is St. Paul's African Methodist Episcopal Church. Built in 1849, it was the first single denominational church in Cahaba. When Old Cahawba was being built, there was an ancient mound here, most likely built by the indigenous people of the Mississippian era. It was likely used as a trade center given its ideal location next to the confluence of two rivers. In the original town plans, the mound was set to be a centerpiece, but unfortunately it was destroyed, its contents used as backfill for a railroad bed. Now, the railroad, like the mound, is gone. It's important for us to know our past, to work out what happened before we arrived. By examining our past, we can learn from the successes and failures of those who came before us, and we can forge a future we can call our own. These bricks have pencil lines on them. From when they were first built. Our last stop was the new Cahaba Cemetery. Cemeteries can teach us a lot about the past. From tombstones, we can gather the names of the people who lived here before us, and often we can find out how they died. Some people died from diseases that are now thankfully eradicated. And some died in war, a cause of death that may never be eradicated. Cemeteries force us to examine our own mortality and appreciate the time we have left on this precious earth. Our last last full day at Prairie Creek was spent relaxing. I read in my hammock while Stephanie played her guitar. I worked on a school project for my granddaughter while Stephanie played her guitar. I watched cormorants flying in the air, and I watched cormorants swimming in the water. And I got to catch one last sunset. The next morning, we departed Prairie Creek in a sunrise of fog and smoke, and a new appreciation for the area, and a vow to return.